What's up, everyone? Jeff from Lewis Physical Therapy and Sports Rehab here. I want to talk to you guys today about how often athletes should sprint, really at any point throughout. Really at any point throughout the year. So, sprinting, one of the foundational tasks, drills, whatever you want to call it, that athletes should be able to perform well. Now, what I will say is, from a sprinting standpoint, athletes do need to have a base level of strength to help support the positions that they need to be able to get into and maintain for sprinting, primarily acceleration work, but also for top speed work as well. The reason that sprinting consistently throughout the year is so important is because of hamstring injuries. So we see a lot of hamstring injuries, whether it's during the preseason when guys go into whichever training camp, and this at any level, whether it's high school, collegiate, professional, they go into their preseason, spring training camp, whatever that is at, baseball, football, and probably within that first 2 to 3 weeks when you see a lot of these hamstring strains pop up, and it could be due to a wide variety of factors, whether, hey, they didn't actually perform enough eccentric, isometric strength throughout the hamstrings during their off-season training program. Maybe they just haven't had the exposure to high-speed running throughout the off-season as frequent as they needed to, and the exposure they get in spring training is just too much to overload them. So when we have these hamstring strain injuries, again, they could be as mild as a grade 1, where you might be back to playing in 14 days, or if you have a really higher grade, other higher grade hamstring injury, you could be out for as much as 2 to 3 months or even more, depending on the severity of it. So I'm not going to dive, the purpose of this video is not to dive into the nuances of hamstring strain injuries, but the reason that we discuss sprinting so much in terms of hamstring strain injuries, not only from a rehab standpoint for sure, but from a preventative standpoint, is because high-speed running, sprinting, is going to be the most stressful drill that we can do to stress the hamstrings in an appropriate way. So, and really, in simple terms, the more you sprint, the stronger your hamstrings are going to be against potentially having some type of hamstring strain injury from sprinting. So when we talk about the current conditioning practices, and I see this a lot in the younger athletes where they go to some type of speed and agility coach or program or whatever, and they're doing their footwork and ladder drills and all this and that. And again, I'm not going to get into that for today more than anything, but really, they're running poles, which again, poles is just another way to just completely overtax the aerobic system. Really has very little carry over to what the anaerobic demands are for majority of team sport athletes. So they're really just not getting any high intensity sprinting in. So when it comes to sprinting frequency, primarily I like to have guys sprint at minimum twice a week. Some guys might be up to three times a week. And this is predominantly based off the residual training effect of speed sprinting. It's about 5 plus or minus 3 days. If you look at some of the older literature on residual training effects. So that's why we really want to make sure if we go 5 to 7 days without training speed or sprinting in any capacity, and this could be acceleration-based work, this could be top speed work, we're going to lose the adaptations that we have developed from sprinting, the positive adaptations. So as a result, now we're looking at a detrained hamstring, which is essentially a detrained athlete from that standpoint. What I will say now, the next thing is, we talked about the frequency, the volume. The volume ultimately of how much sprinting an athlete is going to do is going to depend on the type of the period that they are in their yearly cycle. So, let's just say for a baseball player, their season gets done at, they're done in November, mid-November. They're going to have some a week or two of just some downtime to recover from the season. Then they're going to get into their all-season program. There's probably going to be some type of GPP work, then going into some type of more strength emphasis work. During this time, sprinting volume is going to be pretty low. We're not going to be looking at 30, 40-yard sprints or anything like that. We're maybe looking at some 10, 15-yard accelerations. We're not going to be doing any top speed work. And the reason being is we still want to make sure we have that stimulus for the athlete, but the main goal at that time is likely going to be driving strength. The more that we try to heavily sprint them during this time, we're going to have conflicting outcomes in terms of what we want, and we're not going to be able to get the most out of the strength adaptation that we want there. Then as we get closer towards the preseason, the strength work is going to, depending on, again, this is a very generalization, but to a degree, the strength work, the volume overall might pull back. The intensity might be high, but the volume might pull back on the strength work to allow the volume of the sprint work to go up a little bit. So that's really how you might see some staggering there. And then during the season, and ultimately, volume is the enemy. We want to make sure we are getting consistent, higher intensity exposure throughout the season, and that's going to really differ. Like if a guy ropes a double and a triple the night before, well, they're probably not going to be doing a lot of sprints the next day because they've already gotten a lot of their high speed running exposure that day before. So that is really just an overall rundown of answering the question, how often should athletes sprint? Again, to bring it all back together, at minimum 2 times a week, probably closer to 2 to 3 times a week, and just going off of residual training effects of 5 plus or minus 3 days to make sure we're not getting any type of detraining there. Again, we haven't really discussed how lifting is in conjunction with this, but that is definitely a big emphasis that we want to have at that point. Getting guys away from the long, slow aerobic work, especially for majority of team sport athletes that are anaerobic athletes. They don't need to be running poles or doing any of that stuff. They're going to get a lot better. They're going to get a lot better transfer of skill from frequent sprinting more than anything.